In the headlines, opposition leader Bar Jagdeo says there is now room for aggressive politics as the coalition maintains its grip on power, but says the PPP will remain patient ahead of Thursday's Court of Appeal ruling.
There is room for a more aggressive type of politics in Guyana to demonstrate to APNU and the rest of the world how people feel.
Attorney Sanjeev Dattadin says private criminal charges filed against the chairman of GECOM is malicious and amount to intimidation and harassment. A former captain of the GDF pleads guilty to shooting his wife to death in broad daylight. Region 7 sees spike in COVID-19 cases. And in sport, Trinidad motor racers ready to tour Guyana in November once COVID-19 situation improves and travel restrictions are lifted. With the news, I'm Kurt Campbell. We're glad you could join us. First up, opposition leader Bar Jagdeo on Wednesday said there is room for aggressive politics given the coalition's insistence on maintaining a grip on power despite the PPP's victory at the general elections held 5 months ago. He is hoping that a declaration can soon be made after Thursday's ruling at the Court of Appeal. But what happens when the PPP gets into government? Will the chief elections officer and others involved in trying to rig the elections be spared? Mr. Jagdeo gave his answer and responded to other questions about the elections crisis in an interview with the Newsroom's Neil Marks.
Thank you very much, Mr. Jagdeo, for talking with us. It's been 5 months since the elections. It must be very overbearing.
It is.
How do you manage that frustration?
Well, added to the frustration around the issues surrounding the elections, we also have the restrictions imposed by COVID-19. So it makes it very difficult now to practice normal politics. You can do that, but by doing so, you will put people at risk. And that is why.
What do you mean? Do you mean like protests, normal politics?
Right. I think there is room for a more aggressive type of politics in Guyana to demonstrate to APNU and the rest of the world how people feel about their attempts to frustrate the declaration of the results of the elections. People are extremely angry on the ground. They're raring to come out on the streets and show that frustration in a peaceful manner. But were we to lead them into that, it will put them at risk, and I think we also risk losing the coalition, the international coalition, that has been very appreciative of the patience exercised by the people of Guyana.
So where does your patience run out?
It's wearing thin. I must say it's wearing thin, but it's fortified. We're fortified in the knowledge that the entire Guyanese community, excepting a few riggers who have been out there misleading people, that the entire Guyanese community, political parties, civil society, the media, as well as the international community, they're all on the side of truth, and they're all on the side of democracy and law and order.
The Court of Appeal rules on Thursday. Do you believe that it provides room for an immediate declaration after that ruling?
I believe that should the ruling uphold what the Chief Justice said, is that Lowenfield is not a Lone Ranger. He is subjected to the direction of GECOM.
You don't expect him to be there and present a report that reflects the recount?
The CCJ had already ruled on that matter.
But the point I was getting to is that there's still a constitutional reliance on the chief elections officer. Should he have been removed by now?
It's my opinion, yes. Should have been fired a long time ago for presenting fraudulent reports to the commission, and now more so.
But he remains in place. He's still in play at this point in time. Even if a ruling upholds the Chief Justice's ruling, what happens at GECOM tomorrow if a meeting is called?
I hope that the chair addresses this, because she'd have fortification from 3 courts to act in a manner that would say, bring this to a conclusion now. You're acting correctly. The CCJ has pointed this out. Don't worry with the the few APNU people who are criticizing you, because they will never be pleased unless you declare a result in their favor. You can't please them.
So, Mr. Jagder, this has to end at some point in time. The PPP has clearly won these elections. When it gets into government, how do you try to resolve this mess that we've been put in? There has been a suggestion, for example, in the interest of healing, that you just let this matter with Lowenfield and Mingo and everybody go in the interest of springboard in the development of this country, free of all of that madness.
Right now, at this point in time, there is no remorse, no contrition on the part of Lowenfield. Why should I be supportive of any softening up or softening up of an approach to him?
That it would let the country heal and move on?
Yes, but Lowenfield, but then you may need a signal for some of these public officers who have put this country through this trauma, the lives of APNU supporters as well as PPP supporters through this trauma. So had he shown contrition, had he shown remorse, had he said, okay, let us do the right thing, I'll submit my report. Repeatedly, the courts have pointed him in the right direction. He knows what the results are. He was the one, and his staff were the ones who certified those recount, the statements of recount, and also the declarations in the recount, the tabulation. And yet he's acting in this illegal, unlawful manner. Therefore, he has no sympathy from me at this point in time. No sympathy. That may change if he acts in an honorable manner, maybe in the next few days. Who knows?
You can watch the full interview with Mr. Jagder just after this evening's newscast. When the newsroom returns, attorney Sanjeev Dattadin says private criminal charges filed against the chairman of GECOM is malicious. A former captain of the GDF pleads guilty to shooting his wife to death in broad daylight. Stay tuned. Days after Guyana's chief elections officer appeared in court to answer to private criminal charges, 3 private criminal charges have now been brought against the chairman of the Guyana Elections Commission, GECOM, former Judge Claudette Singh. Attorney at law Sanjeev Dattadin has already disregarded the charges as malicious prosecution, intimidation and harassment and believes it will go nowhere. More in this report.
This is a malicious prosecution, which is in itself a criminal offense, which is in itself a civil wrong, a tort. This is harassment. This is abuse of process. These charges are utterly ridiculous.
3 citizens filed private criminal charges in the Georgetown Magistrates Court Wednesday, including an election agent of the APNU-AFC coalition, Lorraine Joseph, whose listed address is Melanie Damashana, East Coast, Demerara. Joseph worked on election day as a polling agent for the coalition and signed off on a statement of poll at the South Rupununi Region 9 polling station. The other 2 persons are Keith Odan of Central Amelia's Ward, Linden, and Onita Walcott of Victoria, East Coast, Demerara. The 3 private charges against the GECOM chairwoman amount to misconduct in public office contrary to the common law and states that she performed her duties as chairman of GECOM unlawfully on more than one occasion following the March 2, 2020 election. The specifics of the allegations are that between March 14 and June 23, 2020, Singh acted recklessly and unlawfully when she refused to accept the Chief Elections Officer Keith Lowenfield's election report on the March 2, 2020 election. And during an interview with the Newsroom Wednesday, Dattadin explained that under Section 140 of the Representation of the People's Act, none of the decisions and deliberations of GECOM is admissible in a court of law except in an election petition.
There is, of course, the other tasks that must be addressed. Under Section 140 of the Representation of the People's Act, none of the deliberations and decisions that are taken by the Commission are admissible in a court of law, except in an elections petition. So we have a fundamental problem there. How will the court receive any evidence? There is no way that any of the evidence that relates to the chairwoman can be received.
Dattinen reminded that the GECOM Chair had refused to accept several election reports put forward by the CEO, which sought to invalidate votes to hand the incumbent APNU AFC a victory, while the national vote recount showed the coalition lost the elections by over 24,000 votes. Lowenfield sought to doctor his report with concocted figures to hand the victory to the defeated coalition, prompting the chair's refusal and insistence on using the certified recount figures. The allegation is also that she acted contrary to law when she disregarded the advice of the Chief Parliamentary Council that the recount of votes of the March 2nd election was unlawful, unconstitutional, and instead knowingly caused the gazetting of the recount order in the official gazette. But the Caribbean Court of Justice has already pronounced clearly that the recount was legal and should be used to declare the winner of the March election. The recount has also received the support of the Caribbean community CARICOM, which scrutinized the process, and the international community by extension. Interestingly, the GECOM Chair is also being accused of breaching the recount order. No one knows who the lawyers are that will be representing the litigants, but according to Dattinen, it will likely be the same circle of attorneys representing other litigants.
It's intended to do two things. It's intended to intimidate Justice Singh, and it's intended to create more confusion so that delay will be the end result. That's all. That's the only value of that. There is no other value to those proceedings.
The chair, a former judge herself, has always maintained that she acted within the ambit of the law. The Newsroom has been unable to confirm whether the charges were served on the GECOM Chair and whether a date has been set for the hearing of the case. We tell you now that former Guyana Defence Force Captain Orwin Sandy has confessed to shooting his reputed wife, Riona Payne, to death on March 31, 2018 in Alexander Village, Georgetown. Sandy, 38, appeared before Justice Sandal Kassoon via a Zoom hearing for the capital offence of murder, but opted to plead to the lesser count of manslaughter. The state was represented by prosecutor Lisa Cave, while Sandy was represented by attorney at law Ravindra Mohabir. Sentencing was deferred until August 4th, pending a probation report. The Newsroom had reported that on the day in question, Sandy and Payne were observed by residents arguing in his car when Payne took his service revolver and threw it out of the car, after which she exited the vehicle. Sandy exited the car, picked up the gun, and shot at a fleeing Payne. After she fell to the ground, it is alleged that he stood over her and emptied the gun into her body. Sandy then drove himself to the Remorse police station, where he surrendered and handed over the murder weapon. A post-mortem report revealed that Payne, a mother of 3 from a previous marriage, was shot approximately 14 times, 13 to the chest and once to the head. Although both Sandy and Payne were married to other people, they were living together for about 5 years at the captain's Providence East Bank Demerara home. Following the incident, the GDF immediately interdicted Sandy and launched a board of inquiry. Despite the onset of COVID-19 and the drop in global oil prices, an updated fiscal benchmarking study on Guyana has found that the Stabroek block remains viable even with oil prices falling below US $40. The study looked at Guyana's good price resilience and small fiscal deterrent, along with the possible future delays and the associated consequences. Here are the details. The newly compiled Wood-Mac report, Guyana Fiscal Benchmarking Study, was done by Wood Mackenzie, a global energy, chemicals, renewables, metals, and mining research and consultancy group with an international reputation for supplying comprehensive data, written analysis, and consultancy advice. During a virtual presentation of the findings of the study on Wednesday, Wood Mackenzie representatives repeatedly stated Guyana's good price resilience and small fiscal deterrent. The study noted that the Stabroek block still has 75% of its expected resource to be developed, with Phase 3 accountable for over 16%. The future possibility is that Stabroek's value would increase by 70% from a US $40 to US $50 Brent price change. Aguldo, who is the director of upstream consulting at Wood Mackenzie, explained that even with this state, shares will be maintained at 50 to 60%. If higher prices are achieved, the value could be increased and payout period decreased, he said. The team warned of possible project delays to future phases of the project, which could erode a significant sum of the overall project and, as a consequence, could see the state share value decreasing. Agueldo said the Guyana government can lose over $1.6 billion if there is a delay by 1 year, with that figure subject to increase for longer periods of delay. A delay in one field can impact future developments. The obvious is that it will push subsequent developments back and impact supply chains in other development plans, he added. The The Stabroek block with 17 discoveries currently is being developed by U.S. oil giant ExxonMobil. Agueldo said COVID-19 has no doubt impacted Exxon's progress with the least aspect of the production, just as it has impacted the global industry. The good news is that while other tight oil and DW supply sources are out of the money, the break-even price for Stabroek is very competitive, the study found. A 29-year-old dispensary dam Ankerville Port Moran Berbice woman is in police custody after she attempted to smuggle 11 grams of suspected marijuana stuffed inside tennis rolls inside the New Amsterdam prison on Wednesday at around noon. Gladwin Samuels, the director of prisons, in a statement said that Hemwati Chandradio took self-support items for her relative Balal McLennan, who is currently on remand at the New Amsterdam prison for murder. During a search of the items at the self-support office, a prison officer discovered from a number of tennis rolls some small transparent plastic bags which contained the prohibited items. Still ahead on the newsroom, COVID-19 cases in Region 7 continue to spike, and new data from the Trafficking in Persons Unit find that Venezuelan nationals are the most trafficked in Guyana. You're watching the newsroom. Guyana on Wednesday recorded 2 new COVID-19 cases, bringing the total number of known cases in the country to 398. With 20 deaths and 185 recoveries, there are 193 active cases, including 3 persons in the COVID-19 ICU. There are 35 persons in institutional quarantine. To date, a total of 4,563 tests were conducted, of which 4,165 were negative. With a spike in COVID-19 cases in Region 7, Regional Chairman Gordon Bradford says the cases will continue to increase if the situation is not contained. The region on July 28 recorded 75 confirmed COVID-19 cases and is now one of the COVID-19 hotspots in the country. Isanella Patwa reports.
The communities of Aranca, Bartica, Devil's Hole and Arau in Region 7 have all confirmed cases of COVID-19. Regional Chairman Gordon Bradford, during a telephone interview with the Newsroom, explained that with limited resources, facilities and health officials, it is difficult to keep persons in quarantine who have tested for COVID-19 and are awaiting their results. And with 75 confirmed cases and limited resources in the region, Bradford said the cases will continue to increase.
Because of how the information would come, right? Because when these guys go and do the testing, the samples are sent to Georgetown. And then Georgetown would release that information to us as well, how many positive or negative or what have. So we're still awaiting, but we definitely expect that those figures would jump. So forbid, God forbid, but reality is that it will keep going up until we're able to take full control of the situation.
The regional chairman said the situation is very scary at this point, especially if there are persons who present with COVID-19 complications and need additional medical care.
Well, there are a lot of reasons. One, because of the widespread of the region, and the difficulty in reaching certain areas, and even when you do testing and so on, if you need to extract persons, that's another challenge again. Security, you don't have that. Even if you have persons tested and you find that they're positive, you get it positive and so on, sometimes by the time you get back to the area to have them extracted, they move and gone somewhere else. And all those are challenges that we have. Because most of those areas, we don't have things like police station or what have you. We don't have facilities. So that is proven also to be another challenge for us.
Medical teams are being dispatched, but it is not enough to rigorously tackle the virus. Meanwhile, the COVID-19 center in Bartica should be completed by next week. An intensive care unit to treat positive patients will also be established at the Bartica Regional Hospital. According to Bradford, the Bartica Community Center was recently renovated to be used as a quarantine facility. Guyana on Tuesday recorded a total of 396 confirmed COVID-19 cases. Reporting for the Newsroom, I am Isanella Pato.
We tell you now that a Perseverance Essequibo Coast man is in a stable condition at the Saudi hospital after he and his wife were badly beaten and robbed by 3 male bandits who were armed with a gun, a hammer and a crowbar. Police headquarters in a brief statement noted that Gordon Williams and his reputed wife Lorna Scott were robbed at their home on Tuesday night at around 23 hours. Police said the victims were assaulted and relieved of a sum of cash and jewelry. 2 persons have been detained for questioning. Data released by the Counter Trafficking in Persons Unit has revealed that Venezuelan nationals are the most trafficked in Guyana. Since 2008, a total of 337 Venezuelan migrants were recorded as trafficking in persons victim, the data revealed. Isanella Patwa reports.
Coordinator acting for the Ministerial Task Force for Trafficking in Person, Danielle Griffith, says the issue of human trafficking remains one of the most hidden crimes in Guyana due to difficulties in recognizing it. And while multiple stakeholders are making stringent efforts to combat this crime, it continues to increase. New data released by the Counter Trafficking in Persons Unit revealed that Venezuelan nationals are the most trafficked group of people in Guyana. A virtual discussion on the issue Wednesday included representatives from the International Organization for Migration, IOM, the Department of Citizenship, and the TIP unit. The discussion is part of a week of activities to commemorate World Day Against Trafficking in Persons, which will be observed on July 30th. Data from 2018 shows a drastic trend of Venezuelan migrants being trafficked in Guyana. 337 Venezuelan migrants were victims of human trafficking since 2018. Other groups affected include Cubans, Haitians, persons from the Dominican Republic, and Guyanese.
There's a trend now moving from predominantly alleged victims were Guyanese moving out of foreign nationals, particularly Venezuelan nationals. You've noted, and this could be the influx of the non-nationals within our country of lately, and the growing economic crisis.
It was further highlighted that 90% of the cases were females with an average age of below 27-year-old. Globally, women and girls are most vulnerable to becoming victims of human trafficking and are trafficked largely for sexual exploitation. Project coordinator for the International Organization for Migration in Guyana, Montserrat Hernandez, in her presentation said that migrants experience difficulty acquiring jobs and accessing public services, and this makes them more vulnerable to trafficking. And now with the COVID-19 pandemic, the migrants are faced with additional challenges and barriers.
We also know, and we've seen this situation aggravated as well in these last couple months, persons resorting to what we call negative coping mechanisms in order to have income to cover their basic needs, such as food, shelter. So they resort to these activities, which tend to put them at more risk of being victims of human trafficking and gender-based violence.
In its response to COVID-19, the IOM has been working with the Ministry of Public Health to translate COVID-19 precautionary measures in Spanish, Portuguese, and Haitian Creole. Between April and June this year, IOM has assisted 307 migrants with shelter and food subsidies, 1,031 migrants with basic food supplies, and 929 with hygienic and sanitizing items.
For us, we have been concentrating a lot on the provision of humanitarian assistance, and particularly in the last couple months, we had to step up that response. So that means we have been providing with the shelter, emergency shelter, some rental subsidies. We provide also with food assistance and non-food assistance. Of course, this is a process. We do some assessments at the different organizations. We have our own procedures because, of course, we know that a lot of persons are in need, but we do need to see who are the persons that are in a most vulnerable situation, given the limited resources. So we do have a procedure. So we need to do an interview to identify as well, like what are the main needs, and also if there are any additional needs that the persons need.
Meanwhile, IOM's national coordinator in Guyana, Oliver Profit, said under the Victim Protection Project, victims of human trafficking are also assisted with psychosocial assistance, small business grants, and some have returned to their countries. A policy adjustment to allow Venezuelan migrants a minimum 3-month stay in Guyana to access food, shelter, and medical care started in 2018. A multi-agency coordinating committee led by the Ministry of Citizenship was also established to address the need of Venezuelan migrants. Reporting for the newsroom, I am Isanella Patwo.
Police are investigating the circumstances surrounding the death of a 32-year-old Ramona Innes of Good Fortune, West Bank Demerara, which occurred at about 23:30 hours on Tuesday at Somerset, Essequibo Coast. Her 47-year-old male lover is in custody, assisting with the investigation. Police investigation revealed that the victim, who was reportedly intoxicated, suddenly began to cough and vomit blood. Shortly after, she became unconscious and was taken to the Charity Hospital, where she was pronounced dead on arrival. The body is presently at the hospital's mortuary, awaiting an autopsy. When the newsroom returns, the financial, weather and bridge reports along with sport.